Hello friends, SimPilot here. Welcome back to another Microsoft Flight Simulator video. In this episode of the tutorial series, we are going to try this again because I just made some mistakes in terms of when to turn on the lights and so on and so forth. So we will correct this and we will taxi out of the gate to the runway and we will depart. I think, just to keep the video around 30 minutes, we are going to climb until 10,000 feet and take a look at what we need to do when we are passing 10,000 feet. And from there, I think we will wrap this video up, and the next video we will look into approach calculations and how to perform an ILS approach in the Airbus A320. So, before we start, I do like to thank everybody who sent a comment or left a comment and shared their feedback with me. Thank you very much, guys. I do like to read those comments and I am happy that this is helping you. I am trying to keep a high focus on beginner level and trying to explain things as much as I possibly can, and hopefully this is helpful for you guys. So any questions or any requests or anything that you are curious about, just leave me a comment down below or join me in Discord to ask your questions. So without further ado, let's jump into the cockpit. What I have done so far is our flight plan is in place. That's entered into the MCDU. Cruise altitude is entered. Engines are not running. APU is not running. Seatbelt signs and no smoking signs are turned on. And the TCAS, the squawk code, is entered, but it's not turned on yet. So we are at this state. From here, what we are going to do is we are going to start the APU like that. Remember the last tutorial. Turn on the master switch, wait until the flap open message appears on the lower ECAM display, and then we will hit the start button to fire up the APU. And while APU is firing up, there we go, we are going to take a look at the departure chart and see how our departure looks like. So we are, remember, using the Maru 2 Kilo departure from the last episode. I think it was that one. If not, we will use this as an example, and these are the waypoints. I will put them on the video when I'm editing it, so you'll have a visual of the waypoints. But couple things catches my eye right away. So this is a really I'm not gonna say hard, but a little bit complicated departure. First, we need to stay around 200 knots, about 800 feet, and up to 1740. And from there we can increase our speed to 230 knots, and we need to stay about 2670, 3470, 5600, and eventually 6000 and above. So that means we are going to aim for 6000, which I already entered into the altitude selector, and we will aim for our cruising altitude is 26,000 feet today. So we are going to aim for 26,000 because I'm not planning to use the ATC, and we will take this departure and try to maintain the restrictions. And while we are speaking about restrictions, I want to show one more thing, and I haven't tested it yet, so I'm not sure if it's going to be possible or not, but let's just give it a try. DF979er, DF9er 6, so 200, DF9er 200. So let's just take these two, the 200 knot speed restrictions, and jump into the cockpit and take a look at the MCDU. So DF9er 800, so it's coming from the navigational data. However, for some reason the speed restrictions are not coming from the navigational data. It might be something that Asobo has to work on and fix this problem, and they are working around the nav data, and we will be having a update on the 15th, I believe, like a patch. Hopefully some of these issues are going to be fixed with the patch. But if we click next to the waypoint on the right hand side, you will see another separate screen with magenta information. So in Airbus, if it's magenta, you cannot change it. If it's blue, you might be able to enter something over there, and it says speed constraint. So let's try, because we know we are going to be around 200 knots, and it says not yet implemented. As you see, when we have this implemented, this is coming from the fly-by-wire A320 NX mod. When this is implemented, we can set our own speed constraints, and the autopilot should be able to follow them. And same goes for wind. You can enter the wind information for that waypoint if you want to take this to the next level and make it very complicated flight planning. That's close to the real life. But for now, what we are going to do to follow the restrictions is, remember, when you click up, it's managed speed mode. When you click down, it's selected airspeed mode. So we are going to set our selected airspeed to 200 knots, and hopefully the autopilot will follow that restriction properly, and when we pass that waypoint, we are going to increase the speed to 230 knots and keep it there until we reach we pass, let's say we reach 6,000 feet, DF909 or 2. When we reach there, then the speed restriction goes away, which means we can go to 250 knots. Below 10,000, and above 10,000 we go to the managed speed mode, and the aircraft will aim for 320 knots as a default speed setting for above 10,000 feet. It climbs and goes to 320 knots on cruise as well. So we are, I think the APU is available. We can disconnect the external power, we can turn on the APU bleed, and now we are ready to call for the pushback, and we will be starting the engines. So let's call for the pushback tag. There you go. I need to switch my sound source to my headset. Just give me a second, because I don't want you guys to hear the sound of the sim twice, because I think the microphone will record it if I keep it that way. So this way it is going to be a little bit less echoing when we do this. So let's take a look. The pushback tag is almost connected. We can release the parking brake now, and now we are pushing back. And remember, we are going to ask the pushback tag to steer us to the left, but we can now, let's actually just do the pushback first and let him push us left, and then we turn on the fuel pumps. We turn on the beacon because we are going to start the engines. Engine selector switch to ignition, and we will start engine 2. So now let's see if we can nail this time. We are getting close to the taxiway. I think we can now ask for the pushback to stop, and hopefully it will be close to, well. Alright, so we are starting our left engine. It is spooling, as you heard. We turned on the beacon lights because we are starting the engine, so I forgot to do that last time. And now we are ready to taxi after the engines start. We can actually turn on the taxi lights, or we can wait until the engines start. Either way works. I'm gonna wait until we start the engines, and I'm going to set the range, I think we can keep it at 20, or we can set it to 10 just to have a clear visual of the runway, the constraints and the waypoints. And I turned on the constraints so that I can see the restrictions on the ND. Now we heard the PTU kicking in to power the hydraulics. Now I think we can, and I'm gonna do this, and the aircraft is going to be mad at me, but let's see, as I need to, yep, I expected that, thank you. So now engine 2 is starting, which I think we will see here in a second, and the pushback tug bumped us into those, whatever they are. So yeah, they need to fix this pushback thing as soon as possible. It's not the best pushback option at the moment, and I hate to gamble with pushback every time, to be honest with you guys. So engine 2 is coming on. Now because we are ready to taxi, we can turn on the TCAS from standby to TA array so that it transmits the code and the ATC can follow us on the taxiway. We can keep this at the flight plan page to see the legs. It was so unfortunate. I hoped for that restriction to be available over here by entering it, but it didn't work. Hopefully in the near future they will make that possible. So engine 2 is good to go. It's on. Let's turn off the APU. Turn off the APU bleed. We don't need it anymore. Turn on the taxi light. And at this point we can turn the strobe to auto, and we will turn it to on before we are going to enter the runway, or we are at the holding short point of the runway. Everything else is looking good. We are doing managed altitude to 6000, managed heading, because that's what we want. The flight plan will be followed, and we are going to look for 200 and hope this time the aircraft is not going to overshoot that altitude restriction. Sometimes it does. So it says, as you see, the messages predictive wind shear is off, so let's turn that on too. It's under our weather radar, this guy over here, and actually we can turn on the weather radar too and make it to show us traffic display as well, terrain on ND. And now I believe let's just do a quick flight control surfaces check from here. And this also displays you the speed brakes too. I forgot to tell you about that last time. So you see that speed brake indication. If I pull the speed brakes to full, you will see it is showing. Okay, so we will put it back to where it was, and we will arm the speed brakes. We will give us one level of flaps that will be also displayed. I think here it also displays the flaps, but let's just do a flight control check. Full left, full right, full forward, full back, right rudder, left rudder. So everything is working as it should. Now we are ready to taxi. And while we are taxiing, see the messages over there. It says auto brake max. We need to set them to max just in case if we have to do a rejected takeoff, the plane will be able to brake at full power. We are going to inform the cabin at the runway hold short point, and we are going to test our takeoff configuration. We can do it now, and it says normal, so we're good to go. Only thing we need to do is inform the cabin for the takeoff. So release the parking brake and off we go. I will bring you guys back when I taxi to the runway and when we are at the holding short point, and we will take it from there. So meet you at the runway hold short. Welcome back. We are very close to the runway holding short point. We are going to take a right turn here and stop at the hold short point and do our takeoff configuration and lights. before we enter the runway. And I will discuss a little bit about the throttle setting during takeoff run and what we need to do when we are off the ground at about 800 to 1000 feet, what we need to do. I want to show it to you right there because I won't be able to look to the throttle when I am dealing with the runway and trying to take off and retract the gear, landing gear and all that stuff. So hopefully you will be able to follow it when you are doing this for yourself on your own. There is the holding short point, that line right there, and we are almost there. Let's just get there and let's stop around here. That's a good lineup. Okay, so at this point you should talk to the tower if you are using ATC and ask for takeoff clearance. Just because I'm not using it, I will go with the light settings. Nose light will go to takeoff, runway turn off lights can come on, landing lights are on, and strobe to on. Okay, so now we are pretty much ready. So when we enter the runway and when we are going to do our takeoff run, this is what I'm going to do. Let me cut the power. The second detent over here, which says FLX MCT, this is the flex temperature setting that we put here, which I have forgot to put the flap setting. I will just throw this out of my head and hope that it will work. And flex temperature was 67 from the last tutorial, so we will use that one. Transition altitude is not doing anything at the moment because of the simulator fixed to 18,000 feet, but our V-rotate is 125. And the flex is going to degrade the engine power to that setting so that we don't burn too much fuel during takeoff run. You can go all the way to takeoff, go around thrust setting, but that is full power and we don't need to. We have a long enough runway and we can save some fuel if, you know, if we are simulating a flight that's close to real life. So that's what I'm gonna do, and then I will, let's just make this to norm that I forgot, and I will retract the landing gear and I will retract the flaps when we are at the right speed for those. So now we can go and enter the runway and line up. Slowly. There we go, everything is looking good. We have the terrain information, which we will see when we take off, and above ground level it is going to display the terrain information, and then when we turn it off it is going to switch to the weather information for us, because we turned on the weather radar and traffic. Okay, so this is a good spot, looks like. We can sit back and we can inform the cabin now. And as you see, all the blue warnings are gone, so everything looks good. Auto brakes max, landing lights are on, cabin ready, and everything is ready for our takeoff. So now let's apply some throttle and let it stabilize around 40-50%, and then we'll go detent 1, detent 2. See, it is displaying managed flex 67 on the FMA, SRS climb blue, runway and nav mode. Okay, so auto thrust is automatically engaged when we started to do that. Our rotate speed is coming up at 124 or 5 as far as I remember. We can give her a little bit more and then pitch the nose up and positive rate. Hopefully she'll start climbing and we don't fall off the sky. There we go, positive rate, the gear can come up. Now we are, yeah, we know, thank you very much. So now we are climbing, we are passing 800 and we are going to maintain 200 knots hopefully, and the terrain information is displayed right now. We can turn on the autopilot. Autopilot can take care of the stuff. We can retract the flaps. Now we are going to look for that waypoint that will clear us about 200 to 230. I think we passed that point, so we can do this. Manage speed mode. Okay, so unfortunately, as you see, it is overshooting that, and it's telling me to pull the lever to the climb detent, which I will do right now, which is this one. So after takeoff, you need to pull when you are retracting the flaps, you need to pull it back to the detent that says climb, so that it will use the climb thrust. And as you see, it's slowing down to 230. We overshot that speed restriction a little bit, but a lot of things are happening when you are taking off. So now we can turn off the terrain because we are high above or enough altitude at the moment. So when we pass this waypoint, it is the 5600, as you see over here, that says 5600. So we can speed up from after this waypoint, we can speed up to hopefully 250 knots, which the aircraft is not following at the moment, due to the problems with the autopilot, unfortunately. So we have to live with this for a while. But let's just clean up some lights so we can turn off the runway turn-off lights. Nose light can turn off because the gear is retracted. And we are going to wait for the landing lights until 10,000 feet, and we will turn off the landing lights when we pass 10,000 feet. Normally, when you are passing the transition altitude, which we already did, you change your barometric pressure to standard by pressing down, so that it goes to 1013 hectopascals or 2,992 inches mercury. That changes it, and we are getting to that 6,000 feet altitude restriction. Luckily, we are maintaining 250 knots, so below 10,000 we need to stay there. And let's see, I think we are now, let's just close this and see where we are at. Let's put our departure chart and overlay it. So we are here, we are 6,000, we are at 250, we just passed that speed restriction recently. So now, because it says 6,000 or above, we can keep climbing from this point on to our cruise altitude, which is 26,000. Usually this instruction is given by the ATC. I'm not using the ATC. As you see, I set the altitude, the aircraft is doing nothing. I need to let the autopilot know that I want to climb by clicking to the managed altitude mode once, and then it is going to start, as you see, climbing. So if you just set the altitude and leave it like that, it's not gonna do anything for us. If we change it and click, then it will start climbing after we tell the aircraft to climb. That's pretty much how it is working. So let's see. Now, as you see, the display changed to cruise. It's displaying the fuel used. It's displaying the oil quantity of the engines, and then the M1 and N2. Landing elevation auto, 50 feet. So we will look into those when we are programming our approach. And then the cockpit temperatures and the cabin altitude is the pressurization setting of the cabin, and what altitude it's using to pressurize the cabin. Alright, and as you see, the weather information is also displayed on our navigation display. Let's zoom out a little bit and change the range to 40. I usually keep it at 40 until approach, and then bring it down to 10 when we are ready to approach and descending into the destination airport. Keep it close, plane. Do not overshoot the speed I set there. You are above 250, and I need to tell you one more time, I guess, just to slow down to 250. So these are, as you see, it says 6,000, but these are 6,000 or above. And I think if we go to the flight plan page, it should tell us that, but it is not showing it. So this information, the speed restrictions or the speed at that waypoint and the altitude, needs to be displayed in a normal functioning MCDU, and hopefully we will get there with the fly-by-wire mode. So we passed 10,000, we can turn off the landing lights, and at 10,000 you can turn off the seatbelt signs for your passengers to take a breath and go and use the lavatories, or just not tie themselves down, because it is usually how that happens. And now we can go back to manage speed mode because we are about 10,000, and as you see, the aircraft is going to start speeding up, and it will pitch down a little bit to pick up some speed, and when it picks the speed, it will start pitching up to continue to climb to the cruising altitude that we set here. Good thing about the mod is you can make different selections on either display, and you can take a look at the different information on each display, so they are now independent, which wasn't the case with the default one. So that's a nice addition to this aircraft as well. Okay guys, as you see, now we are cruising, we are climbing to our cruising altitude. Beautiful views of Germany behind, and I think it is time to say goodbye at this point. In the next episode we will continue this flight. I'll probably stop here and start recording when we are ready to plan our approach, and how we program the MCDU for our approach and whatnot. So we will look into those calculations, and we will see the approach and arrival charts and see how they are going to allow us to plan our approach and what we need to do. So thank you very much for hanging out with me and watching the tutorial. If you have a question, or if you want to leave a comment, please leave me what you think about the video, and give me a thumbs up if you liked the video. If you haven't done already, please subscribe and turn on the notifications to get notified for the future episodes, and I will see you in the next video.